Caller ID. Back in the day, when there were conventional phone systems and nothing else, the caller ID was something that was overlaid into the network by the people who owned the network. Typically you had one incumbent supplier in a country, like BT in this country, who they own the network, they decide what goes over it, they transmit that caller ID because that's what they've tagged that line to be. In their mind, logically, a physical piece of copper that delivers a phone service actually has a caller ID. That is that caller ID. It's not just a circuit on which we overlay some arbitrary number, but that is the reality today. Caller ID is completely arbitrary. There are logical reasons why in a business you would want it to be that way, even outside of IP communication. So even back in ISDN, if you've got an office that has logically one phone number, because you expect the PBX to distribute the calls among people within that business, but you don't want to give out the DDIs of 1,000 staff, you have one number that's allocated to that business. You may have others as well, but you're advertising this one number. Somebody rings for sales, and you expect to be able to give that out to all of those employees. At the same time, when they dial out, you might want to give the same phone number for them all. Now, in BT's logic, one piece of copper has one phone number, and all those channels they've got for their bank of call centre, they can't all have the same phone number because, well, that is the line. That's logically how a lot of people, especially consumers, see telephony. A line is a phone number. But you have to abstract that and separate the two for ISDN to work in that environment from a customer's point of view. Otherwise, you'd have a different DDI being presented for each of those customers. So the solution is simple. You completely separate the two and you present the same caller ID for all calls coming from that organisation. And what you've actually created is the ability to give any caller ID to any line for that organisation. And that extends out into every facet of the telecoms infrastructure. Caller ID becomes completely artificial and arbitrary. And that's where we are today. Caller ID is a couple of packets during the signalling when you're setting up a call. Now, whether it's carried by a particular carrier or not, because they can authenticate it's real and valid or not, another matter. But you can literally put in the SIP header in the transmission for negotiation of that call before the person even picks up the phone. You can negotiate any caller ID you want. It may be that the particular network at their end doesn't accept it because it deems it invalid, or you haven't got enough digits. For whatever reason, it's something you're presenting that isn't correct. But if they have no rules preventing that, you could literally present 999 if you wanted to, anything you want. So we end up in a situation where you can't really trust caller ID unless you can absolutely trust the person calling you and absolutely trust the network that you're connected to transmit and verify the correct caller ID, which is impossible because the way you're deciding whether to trust the person at the other end is on the caller ID, which could have been falsely presented. So logically impossible to know whether a number being presented to you is true at all. It means people have become victim to scams that use that. As we talked about before, toll fraud is worth twice credit card fraud in this country, which is ridiculous because nobody even thinks about toll fraud at all. But toll fraud, people are being defrauded by the phone. And one facet of that, which lends itself to helping people commit credit card fraud, is caller ID. If you can find out enough information about a person, you might know their work phone number, you might know their bank's phone number. And if they can verify by looking at the caller ID, wow, I think that's Barclays Bank, when you say, hi, I'm Steve calling from Barclays Bank, there's a level of trust that's been communicated by that caller ID. If only people knew caller ID doesn't mean anything, anyone can spoof it. But on our services, if we wanted to, we can change the outbound caller ID to anything we want, whether it's a number we own or not. It doesn't even have to be a real number. It could be a dialing code that doesn't exist, plus 999, 6 random digits. There is no dialing code for 999. There is no country. If it existed, it would be in the Middle East because they all start 9 something, but it doesn't exist. Caller ID is false. Never rely on it. Who knows? There might be a way in the future of having some sort of reverse verification where you can work out the route, or there's some sort of credentials that can be passed along with the call so that you can verify that's the correct person. But at the moment, it's just completely false.